Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, Oscar.
Hello, Mimi.
Or Oscar. Or
Either one.
Osk. O. Oski. Oscar. So many names, but yet the same one. We are at the Sunset Marquee in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, and we really like it here.
Feels good to be loved.
Yeah, shout out to the Marks, Dr. Mark Chang and Mark Rosenthal. We absolutely love the Sunset Marquee. We're so excited to be bringing you this podcast from the floor of one of the villas here. And we thought we would check in with everybody because one thing that we try to do when we travel is continue to stretch, continue to move, and so we don't basically come back a complete and utter mess when we get back to the temple.
Yeah, I try to move, but the past few days I haven't really done a good job.
What's nice about sometimes when, especially being from Orlando, where you're pretty much always in your car to get to from A to B, but when you're somewhere here, like right in West Hollywood, and you need to go to breakfast or you want to go grab some water at the grocery store, there's a lot of walking involved. And so my step count is embarrassingly low when I'm in Florida. And I think here, just in the last 2 days, is probably more than like 2 weeks in Orlando. So what's nice is without knowing you're moving in terms of I'm going to work out at the gym or something like that, you're actually getting some of that activity that you normally wouldn't get. So there's different ways to kind of quote unquote stay in shape for when you travel and then you get back to your daily routine. And I think for the most part we level out, but it has been more of a challenge. A lot of our listeners and followers and viewers remember our 40 Fit Foo stint. And as we near that 50 Fit Foo, I feel like there's always more adjustments. And I love to kind of tackle that and go, well, what are we doing to kind of make sure we're not complete and utter pain and disarray when we get back to temple life?
Yeah, it is nice to walk here because there's hills. So when you're walking around here, you can start off really like, wow, this is a very steep downward hill, and that doesn't necessarily make it easy when they're really still. When it's really steep, you could start getting this like lean back walk, and then inevitably you got to go uphill, which is really nice. But it adds to a little bit of variety in the terrain, which is good. And I also think that my step count isn't probably very high when in Orlando, but we bring him up every single time. But he talks, Dan John talks about purchasing a really cheap pedometer because he felt like the one on his phone was just not accurate. He didn't always have it on him, so he just has this really inexpensive one. And his goal is just to get at least 10,000 steps a day, however he can get it. Which, if you're really used to sitting for most of the day, it's actually, you can find that to be kind of challenging to get that
Yes.
number count. If you're someone who is active all the time, continuously moving, you might be surprised that you hit that count. So I don't know what my step count is on when I'm at home, but I know that our step count here has been much higher because we're walking a lot of places in the morning, so which is very nice.
It is. I'm curious about the whole step count thing because I know there's always been, and you may not have the answer to this, but oh, it's 10,000 steps, or it's this many steps, or this is too many. Do you feel like this is like a sliding scale thing? Like some people would benefit more from 5,000, or do you think that's kind of a nice general, like this is a good amount that everybody should kind of strive for?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I guess I would say that you would need a baseline first. So instead of saying I need to get 10,000 steps a day, which I think a lot of people hear that number and probably say, yep, that's what I need to get, I would suggest finding a way to get a baseline first without any goals. And then if you get that baseline, let's say it's 500. Like, well, I get 500 steps a day. Probably jumping to 10,000 the next day is going to be it'll be exhausting for that person, someone who's completely deconditioned and inactive. And then you might have someone who's like feels they're relatively active and looks at their step count and says, wow, I'm at only 5,000 a day. I wonder what it would feel like to try to push myself to get 10,000. And it would probably shock them at how much better they feel by increasing that step count. Or they maybe even realize, wow, that's a lot of movement throughout the day and it feels pretty good. So that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know, but I'm a big fan of maybe if you have a specific goal, like is to set a baseline first, and then you can try to move towards that goal. And then once you get there, then reassess and see, has this benefited me or not?
So I'm sure we have tackled this before, whether it was on a Forty Fit Fu or even this podcast, but I think people are often asking us about kind of our travel routine because we are very fortunate and we do get a chance to travel a lot and across time zones. And one of the things that I've noticed for sure is that hydration, trying to adjust with, the sleep light and getting your hours of sleep and everything and adjusting. But really, I think tackling the movement aspect, like you said, the fact that we kind of are tricking ourselves into doing these steps because we're sightseeing or we're going here and there. Hey, I'm going to walk to this restaurant that's highly rated that I really want to have their matcha latte. So I'm going to walk a mile. Whereas in Orlando, if you had asked me to walk a mile, I would scoff and look at you like you're completely mad. And maybe we would ride a bike. Maybe. Yeah. If it wasn't 1,000 degrees.
I mean, where we're at in Orlando, it's not easy just to walk around to get to where you want to go. Yeah. So we're on vacation. Usually people go to vacation and they're in a location where they're going to be spending a lot of time. And in that space, for us at least, it allows us to like, everything we need is in this kind of area. So why not walk around? But it's probably pretty challenging unless your home base is a big city.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we are on vacation, one thing I notice is that you have kind of a nightly routine anyway at home. And a lot of people always say, well, I didn't get a chance to go to the gym, or my hotel doesn't have a gym, or our schedule is so hectic from the itinerary. And by the time the end of the night comes, then you don't, you're also on vacation, right? You don't want this to be like, well, I have to stick to my strict regimen. Like we try to be leisurely about it. I mean, for me personally, if there is nothing on the agenda, which let's be real, that's kind of rare when it comes to me and travel. But when I allow for flexibility in the schedule, and like this morning, we're like, hey, let's just do our little kind of morning mobility stretching and just kind of sitting and moving around, but let's record a podcast so we can kind of get these thoughts out, and maybe it will make sense to some people and be helpful, because we do get asked the questions a lot, especially when we travel fairly often. Like, how do you jump back in, or is it a whole adjustment? Do you go cold turkey and just take a step away? And the answer for me, and I've seen you for sure, is no. Like, you have to continue to, what do we say, grease the groove and keep the joints moving. And you do your nightly routine sometimes, even when we're on vacation, because you say like, oh, I wake up and I would feel pain or different if you don't do that. And so maybe when I say grease the groove, you can kind of expand on that so people can kind of understand you don't have to go, I'm going to spend an hour, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and get on that treadmill or get on the weights and do all this stuff. Like, that's a really, really great method for me that's been effective, because I'm kind of an all or nothing. And I'm like, why would I do something halfway or whatever? But like, there's a really great method that you've taught me that's been super helpful in, especially when I'm on vacation, like walking over a form, even just because we're waiting for like 20 minutes to get picked up or go somewhere.
So grease the groove terminology popularized for me was through the work of Pavel Tsatsouline, who's the head of Strong First. And he did it with a book, made it very popular with this book called The Naked Warrior, where he tackled 2 exercises, which was a pistol squat, which in Wallom we call a tam tui, going up and down, which is just a one-leg squat and a one-arm push-up. And but the concept was picking 1 or 2 moves and doing them consistently throughout the day. But the rules are that you're doing them frequently, but you have to be as fresh as possible. So not feeling tired, no fatigue, and they has to be flawless. The technique has to be flawless. So that's where that terminology for grease the groove comes from. I wouldn't say that on that basis we're training that way, but you could also think of it as more just I'm revisiting something sporadically throughout the day. So if we take into something account like our Kung Fu forms, then that could be, okay, instead of me going at 100% and doing this form, I could just, when I wake up, do a few moves and walk through it. Then maybe later on, I can do the next part of it. Or I can just, while we're driving, we're stuck in traffic in LA, you could just visualize going through the form. So all that is a way that I think you can conceptualize that grease the groove concept, which is you're touching base with a skill that you're trying to maintain. Maybe not necessarily you'll see a huge improvement unless you're very focused on something very, something where you're like, I'm going to really work on improving it. But if you're looking at it as like, okay, we're on vacation, but I want to maintain that concept of a little bit done oftenly, consistently, can reap a lot of benefits, especially with things that are kind of complicated or really demanding. If you just say, well, what's the smallest bite-sized thing that I can do and do that consistently? And those 3 F's are really the key there. With any kind of thing like this is like doing them frequently, being as fresh as possible, and doing them as flawlessly as you can.
Yeah, I think what's interesting as we kind of talk about this is a lot of our students who either go on vacation or have a very crazy work travel schedule, and it often leads to them quitting or being embarrassed to come back to the school because they feel like they've been away and that they've lost all of the progress that they've made, they've forgotten their forms, or they feel out of shape. And for me, especially personally, I know that there's feelings involved versus what's real and what's in my head or what I'm manifesting on my own of, oh, I was so lazy on vacation. I ate whatever I want. I was excessive in this, and I laid around and I relaxed. And, my therapist would be like, because really part of life is finding that balance. But I think in order to kind of lock in for people as they listen of, hey, when you take a break from class, whether it be because of work or leisure or a family or things happening, being able to kind of come back in knowing, hey, I'm doing things that, like you said, you don't have to have gotten better while you're gone. You don't have to be like, hey, I practiced all my stuff, I'm ready for my next test because all I did the whole time I was gone was focus on this. But I think the word maintain is really huge and key because a lot of people feel like regressed or I've lost my split or I can't touch my toes anymore or whatever it may be just from a week off can make a huge difference. Now, when you're 15, a week off, they bounce back pretty quickly. I do see a little bit of the endurance because maybe the breathing, they don't know how to breathe so well, some of the students, but I know that as you get older, 1 week off could feel huge to be out of your routine.
Yeah, the completely stopping is probably detrimental. There's a lot of studies that show that as you get older, and let's say you had a surgery and then you're bedridden, it's worse than the actual surgery. Like where you're like, well, you need to recover, so just stay in bed for a week. That is one of the worst things you can do. So I would say that completely stopping would be inadvisable. But there's a concept from Precision Nutrition where they said we need to stop with this pause button mentality, which is conceptually they were talking about, well, everything's not perfect, so I just need to put pause on this right now. I'll get back to it when I get back from vacation, when my life is less stressful, when my parents are out of the hospital, when work
Perfect
is a little bit easier. Right.
Because that happens in all of our lives.
And I think a better way to look at it is this kind of sliding scale, which is when things are really going really well, I can push myself a little bit harder. But then what do you understand what, okay, that's you working at a level 10, scale of 1 to 10, is like, well, what would a like level 4 be? You haven't completely stopped, but you've brought it down to 4 because of whatever's happening. So only you can determine what that is. So I would say, if we use the example of like Kung Fu or Tai Chi, like our Kung Fu basics, you could push yourself really hard. When we're in class, you could push yourself really hard. doing, okay, we're going to do long 5-minute holds, static holds for these stances. We're going to be doing 100 kicks, high intensity. And if you go on vacation and completely stop and jump and then jump back in, that's going to be a brutal class. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so out of shape. But if you were to say, okay, I'm going to just scale all of that down. Instead of a 5-minute hold, I'm going to do a 30-second hold each leg. I'm going to do 10 kicks each leg. And you do that consistently throughout your vacation or your stressful time, you're drastically reducing the intensity and the volume that you're doing. But then when your life allows you to bring that intensity back up, you're not starting from scratch, right? You're not having this feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, which is to your point why some people who take a break from training and leave for a month, that could become the end of their martial arts career or not, right? But for a lot of people it does, and I think a big part of it is they realize when I jump back into that class, I'm not going to be able to go as intense as I was able to go. I'll probably be a little bit more stiff, all the things. And then it's like, well, then if I can't be as good as I know that I can, then I'm just not going to go, which is kind of sad because there really is no negative judgment. We're just happy to have a student come in. We may joke around and say, oh, okay. Like there's many students who come intermittently. They'll come intensely for a month. They'll miss a month. They'll come back in, and we jokingly say, oh, it's a new student coming in. Even if they've been there, they're a student for 20 years, but they've been gone for like a month. We're like, so there's some joking that goes around, but I guess the point is, if you can do away with what I think a lot of us do, which is if it's not perfect, I'm going to stop. I'm going to hit pause, but instead say, okay, it's not perfect. So then what can I realistically do?
Yeah.
And that, of course, depends for everybody.
Yeah, I'm so guilty of that because I am such an intense person that if I don't feel like
the hell you say
it's really like perfect or I'm doing it well, then why bother? And then I get in my head and I spiral. I think one thing to kind of remember as well, wherever you do train, I really doubt that your coach, teacher, Sifu, mentor will be angry if you decide you're going to have a ramp up phase. Like you come back to class and you say, hey, look, I didn't get a chance to maintain on vacation. Do you hate me? I really doubt the answer is going to be yes. And also, is it okay if during the class I'm at a 20%, 30%, or I'm only going to do half the kicks, or I'm only going to do this portion of the class? Some people, we've even encouraged, hey, look, if you can only come in and do 15 minutes and so you don't pass out and kill yourself, and then just spend the rest of the time like slow stretching over somewhere else or like walking over your forms on your own at your own pace. I'm pretty sure most of your coaches, mentors, Sifu's leaders will all be really excited to just see you in the classroom. Getting back to training and ramping up is okay, and probably a safer way to approach things as well, because like you said, you're away for so long, you come back, you're all right, that's it, I'm back, I'm going to eat perfect, I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to work out hard, I'm going to go to class 7 times, every single class this week, morning and night, and then they injure themselves, and then it is the end of the career. So sometimes it's not even the break, but it's the return from the break. They go like 0 to 100 on the accelerator, and then they injure themselves, right?
Yeah, I was thinking while you were saying that is, it all comes down to really knowing what you want, like deep down, really what you want. And I don't know if I could even answer that correctly, or maybe better said, you could ask me, Oscar, what is it you really want? What are your goals in martial arts, fitness, health? And I don't know if what my answer is can then you can look at what I do every single day and they would correlate, right? Like my actions.
Like, are your actions leading towards your goal?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case for so many of us. For myself, for sure. And I teach this stuff and coach it and all that. And I think a big part of it is because if you really decide this is what I want to do, there was this Tony Robbins, right, was the one who made it famous when he didn't create the word decide, but he made it famous when he talked like decide comes from, the root word is to cut. Like when you decide, you've got to cut all these other things out. And so because I like doing so many things, then my answer right now would have to be, what do you want? I was like, I don't know, to do all these things. But most people, if you were to ask, they would say, well, what do you want? Well, I want to be good at this thing. Well, the thing is, your actions are not really showing that because you're still doing all of these other things. And so it comes down to recognizing that that you can't be great at everything. You have
What?
yeah,
Why bother?
you have to really sit down with yourself or maybe with your coach, with someone, but spend that time of like figuring out, well, what is it that you truly, truly want? And then there's this big list that needs to be made, and the list isn't of what to do. The list is probably really what really needs to be made is what not to do, what to say no to.
Yeah, what things to remove
Because
from
deep
your
down
life,
we know what we need
which
to
are
do.
like barriers,
Yeah.
basically.
So the thing is to figure out what not to do to get you to where you want to be. And that I can tell you 100% I fail at all the time because I love doing so many things. So
Yeah, so when we are away, though, one thing I do notice is that your luggage, there's only a certain amount of space that we are allotted, especially when we're on flights, and you would rather sacrifice shoes for your workout equipment, whereas I struggle and go, oh man, I don't know, I may need this pair, I may need this pair, and you're like, I will take this space and it will be all the things. The list of things that you typically bring in your luggage for your typical 1 week off or whatever, like, because you kind of have a standard little packet.
Well,
It's a bit
I'll
heavy.
say that before I go over the list real quick is that even though we travel all the time, I always believe that I'm going to be able to do a lot more than I actually do. So, the purpose of a vacation a lot of times is just to relax, or it could be sightseeing, or it could be, oh, we have a lot of these things planned. And so if those are like these big three parts of traveling or vacation, then I can't also say I'm going to have so much time to do all of these physical things. But regardless, I still every time say, well, I'm going to need a few things.
More than a few, but go on.
So yeah, I mean, it's this like bag that's like probably weighs like 10 pounds, right? A really good friend of mine, Jose, gave me a travel kind of suspension trainer that basically loops. You put it into a door, close the door, and then you can do like the things you can do with a suspension trainer, pulling, pushing exercises. So that goes in there. And the problem is that unless the door opens outward, it's not. You can't really use it for anything other than stretching, because if you start putting weight on it, you're gonna put stress on the hinges. So there's that.
There have been, we will admit, a few doors where you're like, maybe, oh my, no, that's
Well,
not
more
gonna
like
be a good thing.
that's not going to close right until they tighten up those hinges again. So you learn from stuff like that. So that's something that I like putting in there. Something that does get used a lot is bands, glute loops for the hips.
Even I.
And bands for the shoulders. So the reason for that is because you can do a lot of stuff for your mobility, move your spine around, but this concept of keeping the things that stabilize you in your upper body and stabilize and mobilize you in the lower body, your hips and your shoulders, just having bands, which are easy to pack, can do a lot. Doing some bridges, some clamshells for the hips, banded walks, and then with bands for the shoulders, just doing typical rotator cuff type exercises can keep your hips and shoulders relatively healthy. And then other things that I put in there, then it just
We
keeps,
should have had them laid
Yeah.
out here. That could have been a fun show and tell. for
well, the
people.
problem is that we packed for this two-way thing where we're going from one place to another. We're like, well, we're not going to unpack this one luggage, so it's there.
So
But
it's safely put away. But we could have had a little bit of a show and tell here.
so then I put in some floor sliders, valve slides, because it was like, oh, I can practice stretching with that. I can also do eccentric, hamstring curls, with that. There's a lot you can do for the lower body with the slide curls. You can do push-ups with the slides that allow you to do one-arm push-ups if you wanted to. I'm not saying that I even do all that stuff, but it's there.
He has though. I mean, especially
what's
if
nice?
it's a cruise vacation where we have a lot of sea days. You pull that.
Actually,
all
what
the
I
way
really
over.
like with the sliders is they also have a little cushion. So it's this super thin thing that allows me also to do a lot of like half kneel stretching because it has a little bit of padding. I have juggling balls in there because I like juggling. And I have this small little dowel, little stick, which, I gotta admit, I just saw Ido Portal, who's, one of these movement experts. He had like a stick and he was like balancing it in his hand. And I was like, well, that looks like fun. I can keep myself entertained, I guess.
And it's now called El Sticko, just so you know.
Right, silly, call it El Sticko. But a lot of things that go in that bag are things that I've seen to sort of keep me entertained with some physicality. The juggling balls, the slide board. It's like, I can just do, it allows me to do stuff.
I have to share. So a lot of times we are with my family on vacation. And they want to watch this show, or they want to go here, or we have to walk here. And Oscar often will have his juggling balls with him. And there will be shows that sometimes we're not completely into, so we escort them into the theater, make sure, if they need any assistance, and we know where they're at, and then we'll go outside to the lobby area or something. And Oscar will just be juggling, and there'll be other guests on the ship or other guests that's walking around that stop and think he's part of the cruise crew show, and they're watching him until they realize this is all he's doing. He's just gonna sit here and juggle. Maybe you should just start telling jokes and see if it catches on, and then I could put a hat out and.
Well, I think it's very important for everyone to know that I'm not even good at juggling. It's like 3 balls and I drop them a lot, right? So that's part one. But I think what people can take away with it is that I have always been someone who enjoys things that are fun and joking around and play. And yes, that makes me kind of childlike, right? I interact really well with children. No surprise there, right? Because they're like, oh, it's like a big kid. But I think the idea of you want to be healthy for whatever your reason, and you're going to choose to do quote unquote exercise. Well, just choose stuff that you find fun first. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to go with the hardest thing because I saw a CrossFit ad and I'm like, yeah, let's just go as hard as possible. I can guarantee you that the people who do CrossFit for a long time find that shit fun first. They really enjoy it. And the people who don't succeed don't find it fun, right? And it's the same with our Kung Fu and Tai Chi. Ultimately, the people who stick around for a long time, there's a lot of joy that they get out of it.
I think a big part of that, though, and this will tangent us, but in the temple in particular, is the community, is a sense of doing things together. Because even when you and I are here to do our forms together and it's just the two of us, but at least we're doing something where we're both going back and forth, or if we're working application, or we're going to think about writing down something about the philosophy of what we're doing. When we're doing it together, it's a big difference than, all right, I'm going to go through all my forms by myself. It's a very, there's benefit to both. But I feel like a big part of a lot of the things that we're talking about and mentioning is that community. And so when you're on your own, the pitfall is I've got to be all in or it's not worthwhile. And then the pitfall is, well, I'm all alone. I don't have my community here. How can I make it fun? Let me tell you, channel some of this over here. Oscar knows how to entertain himself and have fun. The El Sticko thing, I'm going to post a video of it, is surprisingly fun. I have to admit, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, here I am, and you don't need other people. Is it fun when other people are around? Sure. But I think the key is having a bit of comfort with being on your own, because one of the reasons I thought we should talk about this today in particular is we are on vacation, but we are also together. However, there's a lot of times I'm like, peace out, 9:30, I'm going to bed. It's my vacation bedtime. And I'll wake up to use the bathroom or something, and Oscar's Spider-Man against the wall in this T-spine stretch in with his Val slides, and I'm like, okay, that's just Oscar doing his thing. But you find a way to kind of channel that independence, and maybe because you do enjoy that, but is there kind of a secret or technique in your mind that you use to motivate yourself when you're I'm not with my community? When I call Bison and everyone joins for class, there's a special feeling, and that energy can't be replicated. So when you're on your own, is there something other than, I just need to be able to move again when I get back, that gets you going? Or is there something that you say to yourself, like a self-talk, or you just really like to exercise and move around?
I don't like, maybe that's what really motivates me. I don't like the way I feel when I don't move around, right? So if we could take cruising, for example, they have these long meals, right? Which are enjoyable, yes. But if I'm sitting down for more than 45 minutes, I'm like itching to stand up. Doesn't matter how great of a time I'm having. It's like I need to just stand up. Just give me like a minute to stand up and move around. And sometimes on these ships, we have a dinner. If we're with your parents and it's an early dinner, it's like a dinner at 5:30, and that dinner ends at 7. That's an hour and a half of sitting down. I'm like I have to get up and move around, and then we're gonna go sit down again to go see a show. I was like, sometimes no matter how good all that stuff is, I was like, I need to move around because for whatever reason, I just start feeling like the rust, like, oh, my back. Maybe it's mental, but I'm like, I just can't, I can't do it. So that's part of the reason why I like moving around. The reason I want to keep doing it is a big part of it is we're also have to teach, right? And I can't be like, oh, I can't show you this thing. And the reason isn't because of an old injury. The reason is because I sat on my eyes for 2 weeks. I just can't. I can't do that. But this idea of self-talk, I probably in the past would have said that the negative self-talk is bad. But I would now say that sometimes that negative self-talk or that aggressive speaking to yourself is okay as long as you don't go into this weird loop of just continuously doing it. But if it gets you started, that's good. It could be positive or negative. And the idea of continuously doing something even when no one's watching, I think ultimately, though, for me, I still want to share it. So again, this is probably different than I would have said in the past. In the past, I'm like, no, I only do this for myself. I'm happy. I don't need anyone, blah, blah, blah.
Lone wolf.
But when I learned how to juggle, right? I'm juggling, and let's say you're not around. As soon as I was able to juggle 3 balls, the first thing I wanted to do was go show you. Like, oh, check this out. I'm able to do this, right? It's not, all right, I'm able to juggle 3 balls. Cool. Now I'm super cool. I'm going to keep that to myself. I'm not going to show anyone. No, I'm always like, even balancing that stick in my hand, right? When I was at like balancing the stick and I was able to transfer it from one hand to another, I'm like laughing and I'm enjoying it. But the first thing I want to do is show like, hey, check this out. Look, this is pretty fun, right? And you look at me like a psychopath, like, all right, whatever. But it's the same for you, though. Whenever you've done something that you're happy with or you've had a conversation you're happy with, you always are telling me about it. Mm-hmm. Hey, I just had this thought. Oh, I just had this conversation. I just blah, blah, blah. And I think that's the nature of us as humans is we have to do things with other people. We're not meant to be. There's a reason why solitary confinement is one of the worst punishments, right? so
yeah, facts. Okay, so for those who cannot afford 10 pounds of their luggage to be utilized for exercise equipment. Oh, also you always have lacrosse balls with you.
A lacrosse ball is really good because just the history of like things that have happened to my body, like it's a great, it's the right amount of pressure and density that you can use it while you're putting up against the back posterior shoulder and just put it up against the wall, or you could be sitting on the floor and place it somewhere in your hip and you could roll your feet. So a lacrosse ball, if you're on a long plane ride, take that lacrosse ball out and just, get some stuff going on in your tissues if you're not able to stand up and move around.
And let me just say, pro tip, just definitely pack El Stico and juggling balls and things like that in your check-in luggage, because it can be a real pain sometimes in TSA or customs when they're like, what are these little juggling balls?
Well, juggling balls are like hacky sacks because they have those little small pebble type things.
Beads, yeah.
It looks like you're a drug smuggler. So
right.
you get right. It has been mentioned before. But so lacrosse ball is a great traveling tip. But I would say lacrosse ball could be one thing.
Oh wait, you also sometimes have the grip things with you.
Okay. It's something new that I've started putting in that bag, and they are kind of heavy. They may not be worth it to bring, to be honest. But they're called fat grips. So basically, think of a handle that you would put over a handle to make the grip. So if you were working out with a dumbbell and you're like, oh, this dumbbell is kind of light. Well, you could put the fat grip over it, which will make it harder to hold, and it would make that instantly harder. So for the suspension trainer, it's really small because it's travel size. So of course, putting the fat grip on there, then you're doing what would be an easier exercise. You can make it harder just because you're challenging your grip. I don't know.
I feel like there's some other things that you may or may not. Sometimes we even bring like a kung fu fan with us because you can utilize that to be a sword or other weapons.
But the stick now can be
that. But the El Sticko now can double for that, but it doesn't do the fan part of it.
What else do I have in there?
I think, though, for those of us that don't want to sacrifice our shoes or our cosmetics or our lotions and our 10-step facial routine, it's okay also if you don't have any equipment. Oscar certainly sometimes is able to just utilize whatever's around, whether it's the wall, whether it's just
yesterday,
the ground.
Yesterday I was doing some crawling, like just bear crawls, and what I did was just set a timer for 10.
It's like I bring my pet with me on vacation, just like a little animal crawling around the room.
So crawling is actually really good with a small amount of space, right? Because all you do is just crawl back and forth, and you rest as needed. So I had a timer, it was like 10 minutes. You try crawling for 10 minutes nonstop, it's crazy. So
let us know how it goes.
So I stopped, but I just was like, I'm just going to keep playing around with this until
and there's so many variations of crawls though too, because you could literally bear crawl. You could literally baby crawl too, that's also challenging for anything for 10 minutes generally.
You could rock back and forth. I mean, there's a whole system of it where it's called Original Strength. I think OS. You can search for those guys. They've got a whole thing on just what they call resets, but rocking, crawling, all things, and it's all body weight, all requires a very small amount of space. The thing I keep coming back to is there's a ton of things you could do. I like exploring a lot of different things, but the truth is there's no real excuse that I can give for not finding something to do. Oh, I don't have all my gym equipment. Let's say I didn't bring any of that stuff. I would still find something to do in the room. I can't just...
He also once did pull-ups on the ship.
Well, you could hang if you can't do a pull-up. You could, I'm just... I guess the thing is you could always...
This is just going to be a montage with 80s music of Oscar working out around the ship with all these different things. But to be fair, you're right. There is stuff. And I'm going to make it even more simple and bite-sized for people who are listening now and going... Oh, but this is your job. You guys work out all the time. I mean, let me tell you, it takes a lot of motivation. But even just getting up first thing in the morning and resetting with some breathing and taking those deep breaths from the diaphragm and just allowing your posture and your body to kind of reset and get that start can be a game changer for the rest of the day and then doing it again that night, right? And there's no way you don't have time for that. Right. I mean, let's be real. I'm a little bit extreme when I'm trying to multitask. Like, yes, I may be doing ankle mobility while I'm drying my hair. And if I feel good, maybe knees and hip mobility. That's probably not right because you're supposed to be focused. But sometimes I feel like, well, I'm getting ready for a podcast. I'm going to do this thing. Oh, I didn't do this morning. Is this better than nothing? I don't know. Maybe you can answer like...
I think so.
I often stretch while I'm like brushing my teeth or brushing my hair. Like I always have my leg up.
Yeah. I think... it's definitely better than nothing, but also it ultimately just depends on like, what do you want? Like what do you want?
I want to not feel broken.
Right. So there you go. There is a cost to what people think they want, right? Because I don't know if there's magazines anymore, but what you see on promoted to you through advertisements, right, is these perfect bodies, right? And so people say, wow, I want that. And whether people are taking performance enhancing things to make, to assist them, there's still discipline and hard work that goes into it.
Right.
And so whatever it is that you want, there's a cost for that. Are you willing to pay that cost? I would say 99% of people, no, they're not. Not in my experience. What they say they want, most people are not willing to pay for that. So what they need to then do is say, all right, well, here's what I really will be happy with is this thing here, which is probably just a little degrees less from what you were saying you really wanted. And even that is going to require some change, right? If where you're at right now is different from where you want to be, you got to do different shit. You know what I mean? So
you're saying if it's not working, I should change my method.
yeah, and I've for decades, not even years, decades, it's like I need to improve my mobility. Probably said it on every single podcast we've ever done here. I wouldn't say that's what I prioritize all the time, right? I prioritize other stuff, and I'm satisfied because I can be satisfied easily. I'm satisfied with where I'm at, right? And I can make a direct line of saying where I'm at right now is based on all the things that I've done up to this point. And I'm the one who decided to do that. So I'm okay with that.
All right. So I want to leave our listeners with one image. And I wish there was a way someone could have recorded us walking around today for our breakfast. We went for brunch and we got to the crosswalk. And some of these LA crosswalks are pretty big. It reminds me of Hong Kong, where it's like this big intersection and we push the button and we wait. And Oscar turns and says, let's skip. I was like, all right. So I'm like doing my standing marching while I'm waiting to kind of get warmed up for skipping, because I am not 12 anymore, where I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually easy, because it's basically the regression from a run, right? So it's intensive for me as one that does not get any steps in or walking. And literally we skipped across this huge intersection in Los Angeles, and we were skipping around WeHo, and that was kind of a fun, crazy thing, but I felt really good about it.
And you were smiling.
Because I felt foolish, but
yeah, but who cares?
Sometimes that's okay.
Honestly, who cares what anybody who's watching you and is like, thinks that was weird, the next thing they're thinking about is themselves. They're going to forget about it. Or they may go, well, it was kind of weird. I was driving and I saw some people skipping, but who cares? But I've been having this thought for a while, ever since I kind of hurt my Achilles tendon. Has it been 2 years or a year? It's been a year and a half. And it's affected my confidence in like jumping and things like that. And so skipping to me is a way that it's mimicking the idea of running. And I would much rather skip than jog. I could tell you that.
Yeah.
And so walking and adding some skipping, it's awesome.
And it can be fun.
Yes.
Especially with your partner. So yeah, think about that. But let us know what you bring on vacation, if anything. And if not, how have you kind of begin to maybe integrate something into your routine to where you don't feel like you can't get back into the gym, the Kung Fu school, the martial arts school, whatever that means for you. But I would say be encouraged that it isn't easy for any of us. It's equally as difficult for those of us that actually live the lifestyle. So go on your vacations, enjoy your time, do your work trips, have moments where you can't find that consistency, because that's just going to be what we call life. There's no perfect moment. But I think what's important for us to remember is there are things that we can be doing. And like Oscar was mentioning, things that we can take out of the equation as well that would be helpful. So I can't wait to hear if anybody has done any skipping at crosswalks in random cities. And if so, send us a video. We'd love to see it. So thanks for taking time to chit chat about stuff.
Sure. Did I have a choice?
No. All right. Peace out, everybody. See you later.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.